this, but I wanted to give a little snippet before we get into the video. But I just want to apologize. There was a lot of distractions in this video. You may hear my dog barking in the background, and there's this annoying fly that would not go away. But I hope you guys really enjoy this session. I'm really glad to be back. Let's go ahead and get started. And welcome to this week's Sunday session with Sash. I apologize for missing last week. I wasn't feeling as well, but I'm here and I'm back this week. If you're new, welcome. If you're returning, thank you for coming and watching again. This week we are going to go over the topic of anger. And before I start, I just want to say, there in the DSM-V, there is not a specific anger diagnosis. There are several mental health disorders that you can have or display that may lead to anger episodes. So I'm going to go over adjustment disorder today, but we will still talk about coping strategies of anger and the way it may display within the adjustment disorder. Okay, so I like to start off every session, I'm going to start off with my disclaimer. I am in pursuit of my master's degree in professional counseling. I have the professional knowledge and the ability to provide diagnosis under the supervision of a licensed counselor. Statements made in these sessions are general information and not personalized. For more in-depth information about personal treatment that may be needed, please consult your family doctor or a local counselor. If you need assistance finding these resources, I am willing and able to help. I will link my social media and my email in the description below. Due to this being an informative platform, I am not responsible for any actions taken because of these sessions. If you or someone else you know needs help, please call 911 immediately. And also, as always, I will leave the National Suicide Hotline down in the description box as well. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so as I stated in the beginning, today's topic is anger. A lot of people deal with anger on a daily basis, so we will go over what is normal reactions to situations and what may display as abnormal or something that may need additional treatment for. So in regards to anger, we are going to be talking about adjustment disorder. So adjustment disorder is developed about 3 months after a major stressor in your life. So that major stressor can be anything. It can be a tragic event like a car accident. It can be you losing a job. It can be a divorce. It can be a death of a child, death of a family member, breaking up with your boyfriend, girlfriend, getting a divorce. A major stressor that happens in life. So it's when you develop emotional and behavioral symptoms in regards to these stressors, so in specific to anger, that would be lashing out, yelling, being aggressive, displaying those behavioral and emotional symptoms. And it's when those symptoms or the behavioral emotional acts create significant distress that is not in proportion to the stressor. So, for example, if you lost your job and you become angry, but the way you display your anger is that every time you get upset, you flip over everything in your house. You turn over the tables, you flip the couch, you throw stuff around, you become abusive to your spouse or children. That is out of proportion of what triggered your stress. and it can cause an impairment to your social, occupational, or other important areas of your life. So in that specific instance, if you become abusive to your spouse or children, it would cause distress on the relationship between you and your spouse and your child. It also would cause distress in the family function, and it probably would also cause distress on your social life. You probably wouldn't be as close to your spouse's friends or family. You probably would be looked as a bad person to the schools for your children, etc. Another criteria for adjustment disorder is that it does not meet the criteria of another mental health disorder. So another mental health disorder that might describe anger is intermittent explosive disorder, which we will go over in a few weeks. I think it's actually later on the schedule, so probably in a month or so we'll go over intermittent explosive disorder. So if intermittent explosive disorder better describes what the individual or what you are going through, a mental health professional or a doctor will diagnose you with intermittent explosive disorder over adjustment disorder. And it also is not evident of a pre-existing disorder. So if you are already diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder or another mental health disorder, they most likely wouldn't think that your behaviors are contributing to adjustment disorder. It would be contributing to the disorder or mental illness that you were already diagnosed with. An important factor is that it's not a part of normal grief or bereavement. So when you lose someone that's close to you, whether it's a family or a friend, a dog, somebody, something you love, you already go through the grief process, and one of the stages in grief is anger, and that's normal. You're adjusting and coping with a loss. So a mental health professional or a doctor would not diagnose you with adjustment disorder if you were going through grief. Now, if it is way after the loss, then it might be applicable to be adjustment disorder, but there's no time frame on how long it takes to process grief. So when it comes to grief, a counselor will most likely give it that diagnosis or attribute it to that factor in your life versus adjustment disorder. So once the stressor is gone, the symptoms tend to stop within 6 months. So this is a little different than other disorders or other mental health illnesses we have talked about. We've talked about ones that are more chronic and lifelong. Adjustment disorder or anger that comes out in adjustment disorder is more acute. It's more short term. So let's say you lose your job, and the example before, you become very angry. Usually, let's say you find a job within 4 months later. After you get a new job, usually those symptoms would decrease because now what was stressing you before is not stressing you anymore. That doesn't mean that the adjustment disorder can't come back, especially if you didn't learn coping skills the first time you went through. Then when you experience that stress again, you could possibly go through having adjustment disorder if you didn't learn positive coping skills. Some specifiers that come with adjustment disorder is with depressed mood. So that's somebody who has adjustment disorder, and instead of anger, they are depressed. Adjustment disorder with anxiety, adjustment disorder with mixed, so depressed and anxiety, unspecified, and etc. There's also with like conduct disorder and things like that. So also mentioned losing a job was a stressor, ending a relationship. You can have multiple stressors at one time. For example, if your home life is stressed for whatever reason, you're having marital problems or your kids are having a hard time at school, and then your work life is stressed because you're not meeting the expectations of your job, and then your social life is stressed because you don't get to see your friends, and then you're financially stressed. All those can create adjustment disorder as well. There's also seasonal stressors for individuals. So if you know that springtime is a stressor for you because that's when the sports pick up for your children. So you have to run to baseball and dance and cheer. So it could be that every time around April you seem more stressed than you did when in December. But typically once that season is over, then you're less stressed. That would be adjustment disorder. Another one could be like a natural disaster after like 9/11 and Katrina, or even like a tsunami or an earthquake. After those, a lot of counselors see, or you can see, an increase in diagnosis of adjustment disorder because they dealt with a tragic event and the stress that comes with that tragic event, and now they're trying to cope with it. One of the most tragic events that we're going through worldwide right now is COVID-19. So a lot of people have increased anxiety and depression and anger at this moment, which is causing the increase in diagnosis of things such as this. Again, unlike our other mental health illnesses we talked about, this is strictly an environmental risk. There is no genetic factors or biological factors. It's strictly environmental because the stressor comes from your environment. And again, it's more acute usually after the stressor is gone, the symptoms decrease. Cultural expectations play a huge role in adjustment disorder, and that goes hand in hand with it being a high environmental risk. So if you are raised in a culture where the woman is supposed to be the homemaker and supposed to teach their children, and you don't believe in vaccines and whatever your culture or mindset that you grew up in, and whatever you're living is opposite, or you're not meeting those expectations, it can cause stress, which can lead to an adjustment disorder. Other diagnoses that you may receive over adjustment disorder would be major depressive disorder, again because that's more chronic, where this is acute. So after 6 months, if these symptoms aren't, after 6 months after the stressor goes away, if these symptoms aren't decreasing, a mental health professional would diagnose you with something more chronic like intermittent explosive disorder, major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, a personality disorder, etc. So like after you get in a car accident, it's expected that you would be more stressed and display behavioral and emotional symptoms of stress, but 6 months after the event has gone away, if you still have these behaviors and these emotions, it's time for a more chronic diagnosis, and your therapy would probably change at that time too. You would go more from a coping strategy, behavioral approach to maybe a cognitive behavioral approach where you're trying to change your entire mindset about what incident happened. Another one would be like a medical condition. So medical conditions are chronic. So like cancer. Cancer typically does not go away in 6 months. typically. So therefore, if you have cancer, of course that will cause stress on your body, stress on your emotional state. A mental health professional would not diagnose you with adjustment disorder because that condition in that situation is not acute. It's not going to go away typically in the next 6 months. So a better diagnosis will fit. Also, a disclaimer is that it's normal to have stress and to have stressful reactions. Again, losing a job, let's say your car broke down and now you don't have a form of transportation. It's normal to feel stressed about those situations and to feel angry about those situations. So there's a difference between a normal response and an abnormal response. And when you can determine that is when we talked about the items earlier, when it causes clinically significant or marked distress in your life. So it stops you from performing other functional activities that you need to perform. Because this disorder is very general, it does accompany a lot of other mental health disorders. So you might be diagnosed with anxiety as well as adjustment disorder. You may be diagnosed with depression as well as adjustment disorder. You may be diagnosed with autism with adjustment disorder. Autism and adjustment disorder go hand in hand a lot of the times, and we will get into more specifics of that when we talk about autism. But if you think about the nature of autism and the nature of adjustment disorder, when a change occurs for someone who has autism, the reaction is usually significant and out of what would be considered as normal reaction to a change. And this is why they go hand in hand. So it's typical if you read a patient's file or if you read your own file, if you see a counselor and it says, you have this as well as adjustment disorder. Usually within 6 months of treatment, that adjustment disorder part should drop off. And if the symptoms are still there, then you would just be left with the more chronic diagnosis. Again, except for in situations like autism, because they have recurrent stressors that cause issues with adjustment. And like I said, we will get into that when we talk about adjustment. The most important thing about any mental health illness or situation is to recognize when things are becoming difficult. So if you notice that you're a little more angrier than usual, and sometimes it's not you who notices it, sometimes it's the people around you. And it's hard for us to take criticism from other people. Like, I'm not being snappy, I'm not emotional, I'm not mean right now. But sometimes if it's being said multiple times over a period of time, take a step back and look at, your actions and say like, okay, maybe I am being snappy and emotional, and maybe I should go talk to somebody. And even if you still don't believe it, it doesn't hurt to go talk to someone and say, this is what my family, this is what my friends report, but I don't see it. A counselor will sit down with you and go over situations and help you see how you adjusting or not adjusting could be a mental health illness, and developing coping strategies to help fix it, or not fix it, but to help move on and better cope, for lack of better words, better cope with the situations as they come. In general, I'm going to go over some coping strategies for anger and to help in the moment when you are angry. If something upsets you, the best thing to do is not to react right away and to think before you speak. Because we are impulsive in nature and we go into that fight or flight mode, when somebody says or does something that makes us angry, the first action that comes to our mind is to retaliate, whether it be with words or with actions. But the first thought is to protect yourself and retaliate. One of the best coping strategies is to stop and think before you speak. Because even if it's 30 seconds, taking that 30 seconds to reflect on the thoughts that are going to come out will change your response. It also helps you process the action and the level that is needed to respond. So for example, if somebody calls you out of your name and it's a trigger, the first thing that pops in your mind would be to say something back that equally or hurts them even more. Stop and just think and be like, okay, yeah, that hurt. And think about what you can say in response. It doesn't have to be defensive. Sometimes the best way to diffuse a situation is to walk away. So even if you just say, I can't respond to that right now, I'm going to walk away. And you walk away. And that also gives that person time to process what they said as well. And that goes into the next coping strategy, to express your thoughts once you're calm. And I can't tell you how important this is, especially in a relationship. If you have an argument with a stranger, I'm not saying it's okay, but you go your separate ways, you could never see that person ever again. When you're in a relationship and you say hurtful things, that hurt can carry on even after you apologize. Apologies do not take away what was said and how it made you feel when it was said. So the best thing to do, and I know personally it's hard, especially when they do that one thing that sets you off and you just want to say everything you need to say and tell them how it is. Just say, we'll talk about this later. I can't talk about this right now. And if you guys don't know, I'm married, and I can say that is one tool. It's not easy, but one tool that I really appreciate that we will do if we are really upset. The one will tell the other person, I can't talk about this right now. I need to calm down first, or I need to talk about this later. It's hard to respect that on the other end, especially if you're upset and you're like, no, I want to talk now. But giving them that space also gives you space to reflect on what was going on. And I promise when you guys come back together to talk about what happened, it's going to be a completely different tone and more understanding. When you are discussing things like that, whether it be a relationship or even at work, the best thing is to stick with I statements. Placing blame on somebody else isn't going to change the situation, isn't going to make you feel better, and it's just going to make the other person more angry. So, for example, if my husband said something that hurt my feelings and I reacted with, you always do this, I'm placing the blame on him. I'm making a universal statement that could be exaggerated, that maybe he doesn't always do that thing, but because I'm upset and I use the word always, it makes it seem more than it is. Instead, I can say, I feel hurt when you tell me blank. It helps him acknowledge how I feel, and it helps me express how I feel. And again, it's not placing blame on anybody else. And then he can return, or the other person can return and say, I understand and I feel this way, and this is why this happened. It's a strategy, and it takes time. It's not something that comes overnight, but it's definitely beneficial. Another coping skill is to not hold grudges. Tomorrow isn't promised. It's not. So, and we all know that. And if 2020 has taught us anything, we for sure know tomorrow isn't promised. Next year isn't promised. So if you're upset now and you're able to express it, even if you're not able to express it, don't hold a grudge. Try to forgive that person for whatever they did. And forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to rekindle that relationship. Forgiveness means that you are no longer upset by what happened. You forgive them for their actions and you moved on. You don't have to be best friends with that person again, or, like if it's a relationship and y'all went y'all separate ways and whatever made y'all go y'all separate ways was, caused anger. You can get over that situation and move on. They don't have to come back into your life. The last coping skill that I have is to practice relaxation techniques. And that can be deep breathing, meditation, self-care, like getting a massage, getting a facial, or engaging in your own facial regime. I apologize if you hear my dog barking. But yeah, doing relaxation skills can help. It helps slow down your body. Again, I talked about this last week, I think, in this session. Especially anger, we get in a fight or flight mode. So taking time to step back and relax, remind your body that you're not in danger. You do not have to respond in a fight or flight mode. And it helps you focus on what the real issue is. Okay, well, that was anger. So now I'm going to go over some questions. We didn't have many questions this week from social media, so I went on, the internet, and I looked like, what are the top 10 or what are the most wanted to know answers or questions about mental health. And I also put in some of my own personal questions that I thought would be important. We're on to our fourth session, so I thought it might be interesting to know something about me, and for short. So the first question is mental health the same as happiness? So no, because for some mental health disorders, it can be perceived as being happy. For example, bipolar disorder. When you're in mania, you feel happy. A person who is manic would describe their life as happiness. This is the best life I've ever had. This is the best I've ever felt in a long time. But that doesn't mean that they have a positive or a healthy mental state. Happiness is peace to me. When you can be at peace in your mind, peace with your body, peace in your soul, that's what happiness is to me. For me personally, I feel like when my mental health is the best, I am in happiness. When my mind is at peace, I am happy. But happiness is different for every person. Having a healthy mental state can contribute to happiness, but that doesn't mean that it equals happiness. How do you personally handle if someone in your family displays symptoms of mental health? This is hard because it takes a look at yourself as well, and it's especially hard for me because I'm in the field of counseling. So I never want to come off to a family member or a friend as though I'm diagnosing them, because that's the first thought. Oh, you're a counselor, you're going to diagnose me, everything I say you're going to analyze. And to be honest, it's not fair to think that of me, because that's my training. Like, I'm trained to analyze everything that somebody says, and I'm not saying I can't turn it off, but it's a good factor that I have. But just because I analyze something that you say doesn't mean that I'm constantly diagnosing you. Now, if you ask me for my personal opinion, I may give it. But when it comes to family and friends, I try to leave my counseling role completely out of it. And I should, and like, as a counselor, I have to follow the code of ethics, and in the code of ethics, it states that I cannot have a dual relationship with anybody. So I can't be your friend and your counselor. I can't be your cousin and your counselor. I can't be your wife and your counselor. It's not beneficial because I'll be very biased to the things that you say to me, and you will be biased to the information that you receive. It is best that I don't have a relationship with my clients because it provides the best treatment. Now, if somebody in my family displays symptoms, this may sound bad, but I try to throw little hints out there and then wait till they come to me for help. So I might say things like, are you feeling okay today? Or you've been upset lately, what's up? Just general conversations. Again, I'm not there to diagnose them, and I'm not there to be their therapist, but I am there to be supportive and listen to anything they need to tell me. And then usually through conversation, they'll open up because they trust me and say, I'm really struggling with these things. And I may say, you should talk to somebody, and if you need me to, I can help you find somebody. But I will never sit there and say, you have adjustment disorder and you need to do X, Y, and Z. You're depressed and you need to do X, Y, and Z. I just, stick neutral and say, if you ever want to talk to somebody, I can help you find someone, because I can. So this goes into the next question. Can you counsel people that you know, and how do you balance your social life? No. I'm not saying no, I can't counsel people that I know, especially the city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's small, so I'm pretty sure over my career there's going to be people that walk through my doors that I've seen on social media, or that I've seen, on a regular daily basis at the grocery store or something. I can't know you on a personal level. Like, we can't exchange on social media and I be your counselor. And this gets more difficult as I progress, especially with putting these sessions out here and, displaying that I'm in the mental health field. A lot of people say, oh, can you counsel me? Do you mind counseling me? Can you be my counselor? And it hurts me to say no, and I don't know how to say no because I know everybody needs help. So the best thing that I say is I can help you find somebody, and not to discourage anybody from reaching out to me, because like I said, I can always help you find somebody that you may need. But because I have to follow the code of ethics, I can't be your friend and be your counselor. If you want me to be your counselor over your friend, then usually when a client becomes my client through counseling, I block them on social media, on all social media. Also because it builds, this goes into the question of how do you balance your social life. It builds that boundary. I need you to see me as one person and not as the other person. My social life and my life outside of counseling and work is completely different than my life inside of work. So I need that wall to be there for my own protection and for my family's own protection as well. So, I'm willing to be anybody's counselor, but if I know you on a personal level, like a social media level, I will need to block you on all social media. And we can't discuss things that have been posted on social media or exchange anymore on social media. It has to strictly be through counseling. And that's how I balance my social life when it comes to counseling. Like, I restrict all my clients from seeing me, and I've thought about, even once I become officially licensed, deactivating my Facebook. And not to sound grandiose or anything, but it's like being a public figure. The first thing you say or post on social media will be criticized, and it can be taken back to the Board of Health or the Board of Human Services, and my license could be revoked for anything. So I can't risk those things. what are benefits and risks to getting therapy? The benefit to getting therapy is that you have a neutral person that you can communicate with and say how you feel and not feel judged. A lot of times we don't talk to the people we know or the people that we love because we feel that they will judge us for our thoughts. So having a counselor that is neutral and does not judge you is very beneficial, and it allows you to open up more. It allows you to realize things and thoughts that you didn't even know were there. It also helps you, it also helps you gain coping skills so that you can, be discharged from therapy. You don't have to be there for the rest of your life in therapy. And it also builds your networking. So now, again, like I said, you have somebody that you trust, but they can put you in contact with other people that for additional assistance you may need. A risk to getting therapy, and it's talked about a lot when you're in school and when you're training, is client dependency. So one thing as a counselor that we should not do, and I say should not because I've seen a lot of styles that counselors do give advice, but one thing a counselor should not do is give advice, because it could go one or two ways. Your advice could work, and then your client thinks you're a magic worker and you have the answer to everything, and then they'll ask you advice for the next thing. And then when you give advice, this is how it could go the other way. You give advice to that one thing and it doesn't work, and now your trust is broken. They think you don't know anything that you're talking about, and you have to start all over with building this relationship. So dependency is a huge risk in therapy. So if your therapist or your counselor is not there to solve your problems, and I know that sounds like contradicting, but I'm going there for help. No, your counselor is there to help you realize and practice coping skills and ways to solve your problems, for you to solve them, not for them to solve it for you. That's the risk, that it can be, clients can become dependent. And usually another risk is that not just dependency, but admiration. So a lot of clients will idolize their counselors, and that's a risk as well, because then the therapy is not as beneficial when you become an idol or looked up to as again, like I was saying, the ultimate problem solver. But we do checks and balances for that. In therapy, we have people, so before I can become fully licensed, I have to be supervised. So when I go to my supervisor and we have supervision and I run down everything and I tell them, the response, so that everybody knows everything that is said in a session is confidential. It will never go past you or I, unless it's health or safety, unless you threaten the life of yourself or somebody else. But I said that to say, in supervision, when I say I'm running everything down, I'm giving snippets of this person's fine, they met this goal, and this was their response, this was their response in behavior to this action, never anything that was strictly said. So the supervisor, as I'm learning, will go over with me, they don't seem to be progressing as much as they were before. What changed? What happened? And that helps me as a supervisor in training reflect on my own actions and say, I kind of did give them advice that one time, and that's maybe why they made that huge progress, and then I didn't give them advice the second time, so maybe that's why they backslid a little bit. So, it helps me reflect. I'm sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there of how that's a risk for therapy, but It is. So it's important to have that soundboard for counselors so that we can see our own flaws too and try to change them as well. Well, that is it, and that's all I have for this session. I hope that was very informational for you guys, and I'm glad to be back. I also wanted to mention that in 2 weeks, on September 12th, I will be holding a virtual conference for mental illnesses. It will be on Zoom, and I will be sure to share the link with you guys in the next session I have. So next week's session, there will be a link in the description for the virtual conference, and it'll also be posted on my Facebook. So again, my Facebook will be linked down below for you guys, and it will be 3 counselors there. One already has her master's, and she'll be going over dementia and how that relates to mental health. The other one is my best friend, and we're actually in the same counseling program. She'll be going over like mental health in the LGBT community, and then it's me, and I will be going over mental health in the Black community. So I hope to see you guys at that conference. Please subscribe and leave questions and comments below. It's great being back, and I hope to see you next week. All right, bye.